We are going to take your calls live today. We've got your Facebook comments because we want to know, what do you think about Andrea Snyderman, this witness that was, I don't know how to talk about her. I mean, she was amazing in one sense, transparent, and an actress, or was she telling the entire truth? With us to take your calls today is criminal defense and private investigator extraordinaire Charles Mittelstadt, joining us from Atlanta. It is so good to have you with us. You know, when I was a young talent on Court TV, we did a trial together, and it was an amazing experience, and so good to have you with us today.
Good morning, Jean.
You know, I want to show you and I want to show everybody something that just happened and talk about something that never happens in a courtroom. I don't think I've hardly ever seen this. But when Andrea Snyderman was told that she was going to continue to be under subpoena, she could not watch the trial and sit in the gallery. She didn't like it too much. Watch how she leaves the stand and her demeanor out of that courtroom. Watch.
Your Honor, we would ask that she be sequestered like every other witness and remain outside.
All right. I will grant that request at this time.
I'm sorry, I have to stay outside the courtroom?
Mrs. Snyderman, 1 second. Mrs. Snyderman, yes, at this point in time, you're going to remain under subpoena, and yes, ma'am, you're going to remain outside of the courtroom. You may come down.
I have to leave the courtroom for the rest of the trial?
Mrs. Snyderman, I'm going to say it as clear as I can. You're going to come off that witness stand, and you're going to remain outside. Call your next witness.
State calls Rainier Van Eden.
Charles Mittelstadt, she made quite an impression as she left that courtroom, didn't she? I want to ask you, as a private investigator, if you are working for the defense, you're sitting in that courtroom, and you're watching all of that testimony, is there anything else you're going to want to investigate on her as this trial begins?
You know, I would imagine by this point the defense, and incidentally, I've had the pleasure of working both with Doug Peters and Bob Rubin extensively, two excellent attorneys, and I also had the opportunity to talk to Bob recently about what was going on at the time and so forth. And, you know, there really weren't that many surprises. I mean, Andrea Snyderman's demeanor and her testimony was extraordinary. But it really wasn't, it really played into their hand. But in terms of what she was going to say, they already had pretty good notice as to what was going to happen there. But in terms of how she was going to say it and how defensive she was going to be and her demeanor, etc., that was a gift to the defense. And it really paved the way for them to cement further this notion that she became an instrument of evil and that she manipulated Hemy into essentially being her instrument of death in this case.
You know, Charles, it was a gift for the defense, but she said some extraordinary things to help the prosecution. Let's see what our callers think. First of all, we go to Kevin in New York. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, how are you, Jean?
I'm fine. Good morning. Thank you so much for calling.
Yeah, Jean, I'd like to make two comments. Number one is I have never seen a defense and a prosecution team get along so well. Not one side objected to anything. And the other thing is I believe that if she admitted the affair, that none of this would be relevant. I just don't understand how she can believe herself and think we believe her.
Right, right. And I think that's where the prosecution is going, and partially the defense, too, because you see through her so clearly. And to Charles Mittelstadt, you know, the prosecution brought out on direct that he was normal, because who knew him better than she did? She was with him constantly, that he was normal, he was never confused, he never acted like he couldn't function. He always said that he had 3 children, not 5 children, which would include her children, which goes to this delusion thing, and he always just acted like a rational person. Prosecution won on that point, and the defense couldn't counter it.
No, they tried very hard, obviously. I mean, you know, once they brought in these experts, these mental health experts, and they had Hemy assessed, they were pretty much on this track of this insanity defense. They really had no other choice but to go with that. And so clearly the prosecution is trying to undercut that by showing that here's a, you know, a sane, rational person, operating in the work environment in that fashion, and there was nothing to suggest that he was anything other than completely sane and well aware of what his actions were and his thoughts were, etc. But in talking to Bob,
you are looking at Andrea Snyderman right there as she leaves the courtroom following her testimony. Many supporters around her. Let's go to some of our Facebook